What if I told you that the thing you've been told to do for years to lose fat, the thing almost every diet, app, and fitness influencer pushes, might actually be the very reason you feel tired, frustrated, hungry, and stuck? What if counting calories isn't just unnecessary, but in many cases, it's actively working against your health? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why so many people fail with calorie counting, what science actually says about how your body works, and what you should do instead if you want real, sustainable fat loss and better health. Most people have been taught to believe that their body works like a simple calculator. You eat a certain number of calories, you burn a certain number of calories, and whatever is left over gets stored as fat. If you want to lose fat, you just need to make the numbers smaller. Eat less, move more, and everything should work. On the surface, that idea feels logical, almost common sense. But the problem is that the human body is not a spreadsheet, and it doesn't follow the clean, predictable rules that calorie math suggests. Your body is a living, adaptive system that is constantly responding to signals from your environment. Those signals come from food quality, sleep, stress, movement, hormones, and even your past dieting history. When you reduce the body to a calorie equation, you ignore the most important question of all: how does your body respond to those calories? Two meals with the same calorie number can send completely different messages to your brain and your metabolism, and your body reacts to messages, not math. Think about this for a moment. If calories were all that mattered, then every person eating the same number of calories would have the same body composition. That clearly isn't the case. Some people eat more and stay lean, others eat very little and still struggle with fat gain. Even the same person can eat the same calories at different stages of life and see totally different results. This alone proves that calories are not the controlling factor people think they are. One major reason is that your body actively adjusts how many calories it burns. When you eat less for a prolonged period, your body doesn't just accept it and continue functioning normally. It senses a threat. From an evolutionary perspective, reduced food availability signals potential starvation. In response, your body slows things down. Your resting metabolism decreases, meaning you burn fewer calories just to stay alive. Your body temperature can drop slightly. Your heart rate may slow. You move less without even realizing it. Small, unconscious movements, known as non-exercise activity, decrease. All of this happens automatically, without your permission. This is why two people eating the same number of calories can have very different energy expenditure. It's also why the same person can plateau even when they haven't changed their calorie intake. The calculator model assumes that calories out is fixed, but in reality, calories out is constantly changing based on how your body feels about the situation it's in. When you ignore that, you end up blaming yourself for something that isn't your fault. Hormones play a central role in this adaptation. When you restrict calories, hormones that regulate hunger and fullness shift in a way that makes dieting harder. Hunger signals become louder. Fullness signals become weaker. At the same time, hormones that influence energy expenditure shift to conserve energy. Your body becomes more efficient, burning fewer calories to perform the same tasks. From a survival standpoint, this is a brilliant system. From a fat loss standpoint, it can feel incredibly frustrating. Another flaw in the calculator mindset is that it treats all calories as equal. Your body does not experience calories as identical units of energy. It experiences food as information. Different foods trigger different hormonal responses, affect blood sugar differently, and influence hunger and satiety in unique ways. A highly processed food designed to be rapidly absorbed and easy to overeat sends a very different signal than a whole food that requires digestion, provides fiber, and contains micronutrients. When you eat foods that spike blood sugar rapidly, your body responds by releasing insulin. Insulin helps move nutrients into cells, but when it is constantly elevated, it also encourages fat storage and limits fat burning. When calorie counting leads people to choose low-calorie but highly processed foods, they often unknowingly create an internal environment that makes fat loss harder, not easier. The calorie number may look good on an app, but the metabolic response tells a different story. The calculator model also ignores the psychological and neurological side of eating. Constantly tracking, measuring, and restricting food creates mental stress. That stress itself affects hormones that influence fat storage and appetite. Over time, many people lose touch with their natural hunger and fullness cues. They eat based on numbers rather than signals, which can lead to cycles of restriction and overeating. Again, none of this is captured in a calorie equation. There's also the issue of measurement accuracy. Calorie labels are estimates. Apps rely on databases that can be off by a significant margin. Even scientists acknowledge that calorie counts can be inaccurate by a large percentage. But even if those numbers were perfectly accurate, the body's response would still not be predictable in the way people assume. The human system is dynamic, not static. When you zoom out and look at long-term outcomes, the flaws of the calculator approach become even clearer. Many people can lose weight by aggressively cutting calories, but a large percentage regain the weight later. This isn't because they suddenly lost discipline. It's because their metabolism adapted, hunger increased, and their body pushed back to restore balance. The body prioritizes survival and stability over aesthetics. Understanding that your body is not a calculator changes how you approach health. Instead of trying to force an outcome through restriction, you begin to focus on creating conditions where your body feels safe, nourished, and supported. When your body feels supported, it is more willing to release stored energy. When it feels threatened, it holds on tighter. This shift also removes a lot of unnecessary guilt. If progress stalls, it's not a moral failure. It's feedback. It's a sign that something in the system needs adjusting, whether that's food quality, stress levels, sleep, or training. The calculator model offers only one lever to pull: eat less. A biology-based model gives you many levers to work with. Once you stop treating your body like a machine and start respecting it as a responsive system, everything changes. You stop asking how little you can eat and start asking how well you can support your metabolism. You stop obsessing over numbers and start paying attention to how you feel, how you perform, and how your body responds over time. That's where real, lasting change begins. When people decide they want to lose fat, the first instinct is almost always to eat less. It seems obvious. If fat is stored energy, then reducing energy intake should force the body to burn that stored fat. For a short period of time, this often works, which is why calorie restriction appears so convincing in the beginning. The scale moves, clothes feel a bit looser, and motivation goes up. But what most people don't realize is that this early progress is not a sign that the strategy is sustainable. It's simply the body reacting before it begins to adapt. The human body is designed for survival, not for maintaining a specific body fat percentage. Throughout evolution, food scarcity was a real threat, and bodies that could adapt to lower energy intake had a better chance of surviving. That survival mechanism is still very much alive today. When you consistently eat less, especially over weeks or months, your body interprets that as a potential famine. It doesn't know you're dieting for aesthetic or health reasons. It only knows that energy availability has dropped. One of the first adaptations is a reduction in resting metabolic rate. This means your body starts using fewer calories just to keep you alive. Organs become more efficient, and energy output is reduced wherever possible. This isn't something you consciously control. You can't decide to keep your metabolism high through willpower. It's an automatic biological response. Studies on prolonged calorie restriction have repeatedly shown that people burn significantly fewer calories at rest than would be predicted based on their body size alone. At the same time, your body subtly reduces the amount of movement you do throughout the day. You might fidget less, take fewer steps, sit more, or feel less motivated to move in general. These changes are often so subtle that you don't notice them, but they can account for hundreds of calories per day. This decrease in non-exercise activity is one of the biggest reasons fat loss slows down during prolonged dieting. Hormones also shift in a way that makes restriction harder to maintain. Hunger hormones increase, making you think about food more often and feel hungry more quickly after meals. Fullness hormones decrease, so it takes more food to feel satisfied. At the same time, hormones related to energy and motivation can drop, leading to fatigue, low mood, and decreased drive. This combination creates a constant internal push to eat more while your body is burning fewer calories. As calorie restriction continues, your body becomes more efficient at extracting energy from food. This means you may absorb more calories from the same meals compared to before. Digestive efficiency improves as another protective mechanism. Again, this is not a flaw in your body. It's a feature designed to keep you alive in times of scarcity. The result of all these changes is what many people experience as a plateau. You're eating the same amount or even less, but progress slows or stops entirely. From the outside, it looks like the laws of physics are being violated. In reality, your body has simply adjusted the other side of the equation. Calories out has dropped to match calories in. When people respond by cutting calories even further, the cycle intensifies. This is where the real damage can begin. Extremely low calorie intake can lead to muscle loss, which further lowers metabolic rate. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, so losing it means your body requires fewer calories overall. This creates a situation where maintaining fat loss requires eating very little, which is not sustainable for most people. Over time, this can also affect bone health, immune function, and hormonal balance. Another consequence of chronic calorie restriction is increased stress on the body. Restriction itself is a stressor. When combined with intense exercise, poor sleep, and daily life stress, it can push the body into a state where stress hormones remain elevated. These hormones can promote fat storage, particularly around the midsection, and interfere with recovery and sleep. This creates a frustrating scenario where someone is doing everything right on paper, but seeing very little reward. The psychological impact is just as important. Constant hunger, low energy, and food obsession wear people down. What starts as discipline often turns into exhaustion. Eventually, many people break the diet, not because they are weak, but because their body is pushing back hard. When normal eating resumes, metabolism is still suppressed, hunger is high, and weight regain happens quickly. This pattern is often mistaken for a lack of self-control, when it is actually a predictable biological response. Research on long-term weight loss consistently shows that severe or prolonged calorie restriction increases the likelihood of weight regain. The body remembers periods of scarcity and adapts more aggressively in the future. This is why repeated dieting attempts often become harder over time. Each cycle teaches the body to defend its energy stores more strongly. Understanding this changes how you approach fat loss. Instead of seeing slower metabolism as a personal failure, you recognize it as a signal that the strategy needs to change. The goal is not to push your body harder into restriction, but to create conditions where it does not feel threatened. When energy intake is too low for too long, the body's priority becomes conservation, not fat loss. This is why approaches that focus only on eating less often fail in the long run. They ignore the adaptive nature of human metabolism. A healthier approach looks at supporting metabolic function through adequate nutrition, strength training, proper recovery, and stress management. When the body feels supported rather than deprived, it is less likely to downshift into energy-saving mode. Once you understand that calorie restriction itself can be the reason progress stalls, you stop chasing smaller and smaller numbers. You start paying attention to how your body responds over time. Energy levels, strength, sleep quality, and hunger patterns become valuable feedback. Fat loss becomes less about forcing change and more about allowing the body to function in a way that makes change possible. When most people think about fat loss, they think about food only in terms of calories, as if the body sees every calorie the same way. But inside your body, calories are not just units of energy, they are signals that trigger hormonal responses. These hormonal responses determine what happens to that energy, whether it gets burned for fuel, stored as fat, or used to build and repair tissue. This is why hormones matter far more than calories when it comes to long-term fat loss and metabolic health. One of the most important hormones in this conversation is insulin. Insulin's primary role is to help move nutrients from the bloodstream into cells. When you eat carbohydrates or sugar, blood glucose rises and insulin is released to manage that rise. This process is completely normal and necessary. The problem arises when insulin is elevated too frequently for too long. Constantly high insulin levels make it difficult for the body to access stored fat because insulin signals storage, not release. Highly processed foods tend to raise blood sugar quickly and sharply. This leads to a rapid insulin spike, followed by a drop in blood sugar that often leaves you feeling tired, hungry, and craving more food. Even if the calorie content of that food is low, the hormonal response it creates can drive overeating later in the day. This is one of the main reasons people can stay within their calorie targets and still struggle with fat loss. On the other hand, foods that are rich in protein, fiber, and healthy fats slow digestion and lead to a more gradual rise in blood sugar. This creates a smaller, more controlled insulin response. As a result, energy levels remain more stable and hunger is easier to manage. From a hormonal perspective, this kind of eating supports fat burning even if the calorie count is not aggressively low. Another key hormone involved in fat loss is leptin. Leptin is often referred to as the satiety hormone because it helps signal fullness and regulate energy balance. When leptin levels are functioning properly, your brain receives the message that you have enough energy stored and that it's safe to burn fat. Chronic calorie restriction and highly processed diets can disrupt leptin signaling, making it harder for the brain to recognize when the body has enough energy. At the same time, ghrelin, the hormone responsible for stimulating hunger, can increase when calorie intake is consistently low or when blood sugar fluctuates heavily. This creates a situation where you feel hungry even when your body has plenty of stored energy. Again, this has very little to do with willpower and everything to do with hormonal signaling. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, also plays a major role. Stress doesn't only come from emotional sources. It can come from lack of sleep, overtraining, and undereating. When cortisol remains elevated, it can increase appetite, promote fat storage and interfere with insulin sensitivity. This is why people under chronic stress often struggle with fat loss even when they are eating fewer calories. The hormonal environment of the body is influenced not just by what you eat, but by when you eat. Constant snacking keeps insulin elevated throughout the day, giving the body very little opportunity to switch into fat-burning mode. Allowing time between meals lets insulin levels fall, which makes stored fat more accessible. This does not require extreme fasting, but it does require respecting the body's natural rhythms. Sleep is another powerful hormonal regulator. Inadequate sleep has been shown to increase ghrelin and decrease leptin, creating stronger hunger signals and weaker fullness signals the next day. Poor sleep also reduces insulin sensitivity, meaning the body needs to release more insulin to manage the same amount of glucose. This combination makes fat storage more likely and appetite harder to control, regardless of calorie intake. The quality of calories matters as much as the quantity because different foods affect digestion, absorption, and hormone release differently. Protein has a high thermic effect, meaning the body uses more energy to digest it. It also supports muscle maintenance, which helps keep metabolic rate higher. Fiber slows digestion and feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which play a role in metabolic regulation. These effects are not captured by calorie numbers alone. When people focus only on calories, they often choose foods that fit their target but ignore how those foods affect their body. This can lead to a cycle of blood sugar spikes, crashes, and cravings that make consistency extremely difficult. Over time, this pattern can lead to insulin resistance, where cells become less responsive to insulin. When this happens, the body must produce even more insulin to manage blood sugar, further promoting fat storage. Hormones also respond to movement and exercise. Strength training improves insulin sensitivity by helping muscles absorb glucose more efficiently. This reduces the need for high insulin levels and supports a healthier metabolic state. In contrast, excessive cardio combined with low-calorie intake can increase stress hormones and worsen hormonal balance, despite increasing calorie burn in the short term. The idea that hormones matter more than calories does not mean that energy balance is irrelevant. It means that energy balance is regulated by hormones. When hormonal signals are aligned, the body naturally adjusts intake and expenditure in a way that supports fat loss. When hormonal signals are disrupted, forcing a calorie deficit becomes a constant struggle. Understanding this shifts the focus from restriction to regulation. Instead of asking how few calories you can survive on, you start asking how to create a hormonal environment that makes fat loss possible. This includes choosing foods that stabilize blood sugar, eating enough protein to support muscle and satiety, managing stress, prioritizing sleep, and allowing time between meals. Once hormones are working in your favor, many of the struggles associated with dieting begin to fade. Hunger becomes more predictable, energy becomes more stable, and food no longer feels like a constant battle. Fat loss stops feeling like a war against your body and starts to feel like a natural outcome of a system that is finally working as it was designed. For many people, fat loss feels like a constant uphill battle. Every meal requires calculation. Every snack comes with guilt, and progress feels fragile, as if one mistake could undo weeks of effort. This struggle often comes from focusing on the wrong target. Instead of trying to lose fat directly, the more effective and sustainable goal is to improve metabolic health. When metabolic health improves, fat loss becomes easier, more predictable, and far less stressful. Metabolic health refers to how efficiently your body processes energy, regulates blood sugar, and switches between different fuel sources. A metabolically healthy body can burn carbohydrates when they are available and switch to burning fat when they are not. This flexibility is what allows energy levels to remain stable and hunger to stay manageable. When metabolic health is poor, the body struggles to access stored fat, cravings increase, and energy crashes become common. One of the strongest signals for metabolic health is muscle. Muscle tissue plays a key role in glucose uptake and energy usage. When you have more muscle, your body has more places to store glucose safely, reducing the need for high insulin levels. This makes it easier to maintain stable blood sugar and supports fat burning. Strength training sends a powerful message to the body that muscle is necessary, encouraging the metabolism to stay active rather than downshifting. Protein intake is closely tied to this process. Adequate protein supports muscle maintenance and repair, especially when combined with resistance training. Protein also has a strong effect on satiety, helping you feel full with fewer calories overall. It requires more energy to digest than fats or carbohydrates, which slightly increases energy expenditure. These effects together create an environment where fat loss can occur without aggressive restriction. Food quality plays an equally important role. Whole, minimally processed foods provide nutrients that support metabolic processes at the cellular level. Vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants are involved in energy production, hormone regulation, and recovery. When the diet is dominated by ultra-processed foods, these systems become strained. Even if calorie intake is controlled, the lack of nutritional support can impair metabolic function. Another key component of metabolic health is insulin sensitivity. When cells respond well to insulin, glucose can be cleared from the bloodstream efficiently. This reduces the need for high insulin levels and allows the body to access stored fat more easily. Regular movement, especially strength training and walking, improves insulin sensitivity. Adequate sleep and stress management also play major roles in this process. Sleep is often underestimated in fat loss, but it has a direct impact on metabolic health. During sleep, the body regulates hormones involved in hunger, fullness, and energy use. Poor sleep disrupts these hormones, leading to increased appetite and reduced insulin sensitivity. Over time, this makes fat loss harder, even if diet and exercise are consistent. Prioritizing sleep supports the metabolic processes that allow fat loss to happen naturally. Stress management is another critical factor. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, which can interfere with insulin function and promote fat storage. Stress also increases cravings for high-energy foods and reduces motivation for physical activity. When stress is addressed through better boundaries, recovery, and lifestyle adjustments, the body becomes more receptive to fat loss signals. Eating patterns influence metabolic health as well. Constant snacking keeps insulin elevated and limits the body's ability to switch into fat-burning mode. Allowing time between meals gives insulin a chance to fall, supporting metabolic flexibility. This does not require extreme fasting or skipping meals, but it does require structure and intention around eating. When these factors come together, something important changes. The body no longer feels threatened. Energy availability feels consistent, nutrients are sufficient, and recovery is supported. In this state, the body is more willing to release stored energy. Fat loss becomes a response to improved internal conditions rather than a forced outcome of deprivation. This is why people who focus on metabolic health often find that fat loss happens without constant effort. Hunger becomes less intense and more predictable. Energy levels improve, making movement more enjoyable rather than exhausting. The need to track every bite fades because the body begins to regulate intake more effectively on its own. Improving metabolic health also protects long-term results. When fat loss occurs in a way that supports muscle, hormones, and recovery, it is more likely to be maintained. The body does not perceive the process as a threat, so there is less pushback in the form of slowed metabolism or increased hunger. This contrasts sharply with approaches that rely on extreme restriction, which often lead to rebound weight gain. Perhaps most importantly, focusing on metabolic health shifts the relationship with food and exercise. Food becomes a tool for nourishment rather than a number to control. Exercise becomes a way to build strength and resilience rather than a punishment for eating. This mindset makes consistency easier, and consistency is what drives long-term change. When fat loss is approached as a side effect of better metabolic health, it no longer dominates every thought. Progress becomes something you notice over time rather than something you chase daily. The body begins to work with you instead of against you, creating a sense of stability that makes healthy habits easier to maintain and results easier to sustain. Many people approach fat loss and health improvement with the mindset that control comes from numbers. They track every calorie, measure every gram of food, and weigh themselves obsessively, believing that success is found in strict adherence to these metrics. The problem with this approach is that the human body does not operate like a spreadsheet. Your body responds to signals, not numbers, and attempting to control it purely through measurement often leads to frustration, stress, and even metabolic resistance. Learning to focus on signals rather than numbers is one of the most powerful shifts you can make if you want sustainable results. When you rely on numbers to dictate your actions, you disconnect from the feedback your body is constantly providing. Hunger, fullness, energy levels, mood, sleep quality, and even performance during workouts are all forms of information that tell you how your body is functioning. Ignoring these signals in favor of rigid rules creates a constant tug-of-war between your willpower and your biology. Eventually, biology wins every time because your body is designed to protect itself and maintain balance. One of the most important signals comes from satiety and hunger cues. When you eat, your body releases hormones like leptin to signal fullness and ghrelin to signal hunger. These hormones are remarkably effective at guiding energy intake when they are functioning properly. However, strict calorie tracking, constant restriction, and the consumption of highly processed foods can disrupt these signals. Over time, people learn to ignore hunger and fullness, eating according to a number on a screen rather than listening to what their body actually needs. This disconnect leads to cycles of overeating, restriction, and guilt. Food quality acts as a primary signal to the body, even more so than quantity. Whole, minimally processed foods provide fiber, protein, and micronutrients that communicate to your body that it is nourished and safe. Processed foods, even at the same calorie level, send a different message. They are often digested quickly, lack fiber, and fail to provide the full spectrum of nutrients needed for optimal metabolic function. When your body receives signals from high-quality foods, it is more likely to regulate energy naturally, burn fat efficiently, and maintain muscle. Conversely, when it receives signals from low-quality foods, it can trigger cravings, blood sugar spikes, and fat storage. Timing and frequency of meals also convey powerful signals. Constant snacking keeps insulin elevated, which discourages fat burning. Allowing periods without food helps insulin drop, giving the body an opportunity to access stored energy. This doesn't require extreme fasting, but structured eating patterns allow the body to operate in a way that aligns with its natural rhythms. When you respond to these rhythms, your body becomes more efficient and energy levels stabilize. Movement is another form of communication with the body. Exercise signals strength, growth, and adaptability. Strength training, in particular, tells the body that muscle is valuable and should be preserved, which supports a higher resting metabolism. Cardiovascular movement provides signals that improve circulation, endurance, and energy utilization. Overdoing cardio as a method to burn calories without considering metabolic health can actually signal stress, prompting cortisol release and interfering with fat loss. The body interprets different forms of movement differently, and tuning into these signals helps optimize results without obsessing over calorie burn. Sleep and recovery are essential signals that many people overlook. Poor sleep alters hunger hormones, reduces insulin sensitivity, and increases stress hormone levels. The body interprets lack of sleep as a signal of danger or imbalance, which can trigger fat storage and cravings. When you prioritize sleep and recovery, your body receives a clear signal that conditions are safe, energy is abundant, and it can operate efficiently. This supports metabolic health and makes fat loss far more attainable than simply reducing caloric intake. Stress management is similarly critical. Chronic stress signals to the body that it is under threat. Cortisol rises, blood sugar fluctuates, and fat storage, particularly around the abdomen, increases. Stress signals also amplify cravings for high-calorie foods and reduce motivation for movement. By managing stress through lifestyle changes, mindfulness, or intentional recovery practices, the body receives a signal that it is safe to operate normally. This reduces hormonal interference and allows fat loss to occur naturally without the need for extreme restriction. One of the reasons focusing on signals rather than numbers is so effective is that it aligns with the body's natural intelligence. When you give your body the right signals, nutrient-dense foods, adequate protein, structured movement, sufficient sleep, and low stress, it responds by regulating energy intake, optimizing metabolism, and utilizing stored fat. This approach works with biology rather than against it, creating an environment where sustainable fat loss is a natural outcome rather than a forced battle. Psychologically, shifting focus from numbers to signals reduces the mental burden of dieting. Calorie counting and strict adherence to arbitrary targets often lead to anxiety, obsession, and guilt when deviations occur. When you listen to your body's signals, eating and movement become intuitive and less stressful. This promotes consistency over time, which is the most important factor in long-term health and fat management. Consistency does not come from rigid rules, it comes from responding effectively to the information your body provides. This approach also protects against the pitfalls of metabolic adaptation. Extreme calorie restriction often triggers the body to slow its metabolism and increase hunger signals, making it difficult to continue losing fat and easy to regain it later. When you focus on signals, you support metabolic function instead of suppressing it. This means the body can burn fat efficiently while maintaining muscle, energy, and hormonal balance. Metabolic adaptation still occurs in response to extreme restriction, but by responding to signals instead of forcing numbers, you minimize negative adaptations and support long-term health. Over time, learning to interpret and respond to these signals transforms the way you relate to food, movement, and your body. You stop viewing food as a problem to solve and start viewing it as information and fuel. You stop seeing exercise as a punishment and start seeing it as a tool to communicate strength and vitality to your body. You stop trying to control every gram and calorie and instead allow your body to guide you toward choices that support your goals naturally. This not only improves fat loss outcomes, but also enhances overall health, energy, and quality of life. Focusing on signals rather than numbers also encourages experimentation and personalization. Every body is different, and what works for one person may not work for another. By paying attention to hunger cues, energy levels, recovery and performance, you can adjust your approach in real time based on feedback from your own body. This creates a flexible system that adapts with you rather than relying on rigid, one-size-fits-all rules. Over time, this intuitive approach becomes second nature, making fat loss and health improvement sustainable without constant tracking. By training yourself to read these signals effectively, you also build trust in your body's intelligence. You stop fearing food and start trusting that your body knows what it needs. You begin to recognize when you genuinely need energy, when you are stressed or fatigued, and when your body is thriving. This self-awareness fosters a healthier, more balanced approach to life, fitness, and nutrition, turning what once felt like a constant struggle into a manageable, even empowering journey. If this video challenged something you've believed for a long time, that's a good thing. Growth starts there. And if you want more content that breaks down health and fitness without the nonsense, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. Because in the next videos, we're going even deeper into how to build a healthy body that actually lasts.